In general, people are excited, people are fearful. And really what they're fearful about, I think it's less about the extinction piece or the end of humanity. I think some of it's about like, hey, will this AI also represent like my culture, my values, my history as a nation or as a community, right?
Welcome. This is episode 28 of the Go Sokal Podcast, and today we have our Chief Technology Officer, Jason Jones, on with us. And we're going to start the conversation off with a general overview of basic technological advancements that we're experiencing in this day and age. And then we're going into a fascinating subject of AI, which you're seeing everywhere in the news. So yeah, let's get into it. First of all, Jason, welcome, and it's such a pleasure having you on. It's been a long time, it seems, 2 years since your last visit here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. It's flown by and excited to be back.
Before we get started, can you just give like a really quick primer for people who may not know you, a little of your experience in the technology industry?
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Sokal for a little over like 2.5 years now. From a technology standpoint, really goes back to my childhood, very entrepreneurial in everything I did, from running like independent businesses in my parents' like backyard to like washing cars, trying to use technology to improve everything that we did in that, from building computers to selling those, to then transitioning even to college and working for software startups, and then working in the ad industry. So ad industry and technology, definitely both passions. I'm a car fanatic. And been in ad and tech for over 20 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to guess 2 decades. So.
Yep, that's right. You're nice, right on. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So my first question is just looking more generally like about technology. What are some current things that are happening in technology that you personally are excited about or that you're noticing?
Yeah. So I'll probably answer a lot of this from what we're doing from a Sokal perspective.
Sure.
Because that's like what I'm really, really most excited about.
Yeah.
And I think, like the convergence, especially coming out of the pandemic, convergence of how people are interacting with technology is shifting, how people are ordering services on demand, how they're interacting even on their mobile devices. A lot of that has shifted, especially over the last 3 years or so. And so from a Sokal perspective, one thing that we're really excited about is a lot of new technology initiatives on our website platform, taking sort of best-in-class consumer experiences and applying those to automotive websites, and really providing an amazing experience for people on mobile. We know that like 60 to 80% of traffic to our website platform is from mobile. And when you look at the landscape around that from our competitor set, mobile is not the thing that people are excelling at. So we're really focused on that and excited about that as well. I think another thing just this applies to us as a business, to our clients, and to the consumer space. Like anyone who's read any article in the last, 6 months to 12 months has probably been inundated or read about AI.
Yep.
And AI is just a hot topic right now for a lot of reasons. So excited about that as well.
You've mentioned a few times or a couple of times in the last few years or in the last couple of years, You've seen a lot of different developments, rapid growth.
Yep.
Why all the hype with artificial intelligence right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, artificial intelligence really goes back a long time, like decades. And I really think like coming into the 2010s and then accelerating through, the last few years, there's been a few things that are causing that hype to happen. So one is just computing power. So the idea of neural networks and processing power to actually compute huge amounts of data, that has gotten to a point where AI becomes a lot more accessible, a lot more usable. And then I think simply the other thing is just that there's this new, the idea of of AI that feels like you're talking to a human and you're getting a human-like response. I think that is a huge, sort of thing that's made people really interested in what's going on.
It almost could be traced back. Some of that could be early innovations with Apple and the Siri, where you're forming a relationship with your phone in a conversational manner in that way.
Totally. I mean, I think that's a great example. If you think about Siri, if you think about Alexa, even my kids, like they talk to Alexa all the time, and Alexa, will sing a song about being your friendly AI. And I think that almost in the consumer space really primed people for sort of this, what I would consider golden age of AI that we're entering into to be able to, sort of comprehend or interact or be willing to, engage with that type of thing.
I definitely feel very fortunate that we are able to experience this golden age, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting time. I think just some of the things. I mean, just the idea that you can, like Chat GPT, if we think about that, which is the thing that people have heard a ton about recently. The way people are using that is just really fascinating. And if you've tried it yourself, like going and having a conversation with it feels like the future in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And so that's exciting, I think.
Could you bring up a few ways that we're already using AI at work?
Yeah, absolutely. So even our, talking about AI going back like, several years, in SoCal, we've been using AI, I would say, heavily for several years, including if we think about like our digital campaigns and how we create audiences. A lot of that is driven by AI and machine learning and making those as good as they can be. I think another example, and this we actually just implemented in the last like year and a half.
Yep.
We call it Momentum Data Guard, but it's our full security suite that runs on top of our website platform. And it basically is looking at bad bots on the internet, people who are, nefarious in nature, trying to steal data.
Yep.
And it's using AI to protect like essentially our whole website platform. It learns over time and gets better over time on its own. And so that's been a really unique thing too. And then I will say a couple other interesting uses for our SEO team, like SEO content writing. That's been a heavy use of AI that we continue to adapt. It still requires an expert, obviously,
Sure,
but it is a real help when you're focused on a certain thing to have an AI sort of assistant with you and helping create content.
Obviously, you remember I reached out to you a few weeks ago asking if I could have permission to utilize the Jasper app. And I was able to basically engineer about 20 different script options by utilizing different prompts. And I could get very refined. I could say something like, give me a script that's 100 words and is the tone of Indiana Jones and specifies all the aspects of a proper SEO campaign or something.
Yeah.
But putting very specific parameters, and then depending on what kind of response I got, then continuing to refine those prompts to get exactly what I needed. But I'm kind of like the ringleader, and this is like Jasper is kind of like my pet. Like I'm going to train you to get me what I need, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a perfect like use case scenario, and a tool like Jasper, which is a little more vetted than maybe some of the other AI tools that people might access.
Yep.
I think it's a perfect example. And, I don't know how you felt, but it saves time, helps like expand sort of the creative option from a standpoint of you can iterate on it, makes it more efficient. And I think overall it's great.
I was actually speaking with Alex, who's behind the cameras. Thanks, Alex. Earlier today, just talking about the creative process in general, and in the advertising industry and in our company in general, we do so many creative things in all the different departments. But like the whole act of getting started, like you've got your task, you've got your deliverable, but how do you get started? AI can see as a major advantage to getting that creative boost or that fire started, and then you can refine it and say, no, I need it to be more this or that. But like at least getting the ball rolling is sometimes the hardest part as a creative person.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example from like our industry and creative industry. You know, another thing I was thinking about, like even in my own personal like life, planning a trip recently, I just was curious, and in Chat GPT, I said, "Hey, give me like travel options to go." We were going to, my wife and I went to Big Sur, and we were like, like give me the best like travel itinerary for Big Sur. And it was so fascinating because Chat GPT spit out like 10 options that were actually very good. But it was a primer to say like, okay, like this is, some good ideas and good options, but we're going to refine it from there and
definitely
build on it and, build our trip. So
it's kind of like the ultimate brainstorm partner in some ways.
That's a great, I love that. I think that's totally true. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is kind of like looking outside work a little bit. What are some interesting current uses of AI that you find cool or inspiring or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I think like the things, I mean, obviously like Siri, Alexa, but I think the power of AI, even that's being used currently in stuff like medical, like that's amazing. Like learning, helping to cure cancer, like detecting cancer early, all of that stuff. I also think, and people may not really realize this or think about it, but even like with Uber and on demand, like how they affect their pricing, but also how efficiently some of that stuff runs. That's a great example of what AI is doing to help that work more efficiently in our daily lives. And so I think those are two really kind of interesting examples that maybe people don't think of that are really helpful in our daily lives to help.
Now going back a little bit more to the work you're doing here.
Yeah.
How can AI, you've mentioned it from the get-go.
Sure.
What we're already kind of doing, but what can you elaborate a little bit more on how AI can help us, help our clients moving forward?
It's already helping our clients, no doubt.
Definitely.
Bringing a lot of efficiency, bringing, I think, additional value to our ideas. And then I think like going forward, some of the things we're looking at, right? So improving chat software, right? So especially if you think about automotive dealers and one of their clients visiting our website platform, really having an interesting like AI integration for chat that works really well. Another thing looking at is like, I talked about like the rollout of our new sort of website look and feel and platform, which is going really well. We continue to iterate on that and make it better based on what people are doing with the site, like how they're interacting. And a goal of that is to apply AI modeling to understand like how do we make it even better, right? So there's like even in that scenario with the number of websites we have and the amount of data we're able to sort of see on a general basis of how people are engaging right with the site. AI is really helpful in helping analyze that to say, hey, this would work better, right? Or change this because we're going to get a better result. Or maybe because this client is in this specific area with a specific demographic, we can tune this to make it better. And so that's an ongoing sort of thing that we are delving into that I think will be, really powerful long term. I also think then on the backside of that, looking at all of our reporting, one other thing we've done this year is we've rolled out a whole new reporting platform, Momentum Reporting, and it's a complete revamp, very powerful. And a goal of that is to also take all of that data, from how a client engages with, our content to make it better. And so applying AI to that, it will be super beneficial to our clients for sure.
It kind of reminds me of the graphic that Tim is working on. I don't know if you've seen it yet. It shows where people are tapping or clicking on the website.
Yep.
So based on where they're, and this goes back to like usability that I learned about like in art school, but it's like if people are using it in a certain way, you can make adjustments on your site to make sure that those buttons are more prominent or that image is, you know, seen first or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great, so the heat map, that's
Heat
a
map,
great,
excuse me.
yeah. That's a great example of leveraging that, having a lot of that data, but then trying to analyze it with an AI tool to understand it even more deeply to improve, you know, the website, which ultimately is a better consumer experience for the people who are visiting it, and benefits our clients. So yeah, for sure. It's a great example.
A while back, I don't know how long ago, but a bunch of AI experts, public figures, I'm kind of reading this so I make sure that I get the quote right, expressed their concern about AI in general.
Yeah.
Obviously, you mentioned Chat GPT, but there's also artificial general intelligence, or AGI, which is the kind that can learn like a human can learn and make adjustments accordingly rather than just respond to prompts and all that kind of stuff. Is a huge highlight in the news cycle where they said mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. And there was a bunch of different reactions to it, but what's your take generally on the danger of AI, or are these people putting out crazy notions that this could be the end, so to speak?
I mean, right? That's like, it's very interesting, like that whole concept. And that what you just read is considered the 22-word statement that several high-profile technology CEOs and even the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, signed on to say, like, this is a commitment or a thing that we're saying like is really important. Take notice. Also, I don't know if you follow this, but in May, the May issue of Time Magazine, the front cover of it said, the title of the article was just big, bold text, "The End of Humanity." And it was all about like, what is AI going to do and cause and all that. You may have seen another news article that was the godfather of AI, that worked at Google. He left to bring sort of insight into what's happening. So I think there's a risk, right? As in anything, like any advancement of anything we've ever known, like in history, there's certainly a risk. Do I think some of those things that we are talking about are sensationalized a bit? Probably. I think Time took a lot of heat for the title of their cover as sort of sensationalized. So I do think there's a risk, but I think the reward is like way greater, right? And I think with really good sort of guidelines around how we engage with AI and what happens over the long term, it's, you know, will be really okay, but certainly could go wrong. And I think, like, if you look at other technology advancements, I think a lot of those conversations, they looked different, but I think there were a lot of similar conversations in our history about, you know, things that are world changing, are life changing, and certainly I think this moment in AI is the beginning of that.
It was almost kind of like the birth of the internet too, where they're like, is this going to be the end of humanity as we know it, so to speak?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, think about the birth of the internet, like what the global scale, like ramifications of that are. Many great things, many not so great things, but ultimately, like, we would say we're probably better off with it than without it. Even if you go back to, like, you know, the car, the invention of the car, and going from horses to cars, people were like, oh my gosh, we can't do this. Like, this is crazy. And it, you know, I think there will be a time to catch up. I think it will redefine industries. I think it will redefine how people interact with things. But I think overall, you know, there are some conversations about we should like take a 6-month pause, or we should take a break from AI or the development of it. And it's like, that's probably not really feasible at all.
No, because it's going on whether they like it or not.
Exactly. And so I think it's just like we need to know how to engage in it, in a way that sets up good guidelines. And, I think it'll be good.
The guidelines aspect, I don't know if that's like a governmental agency or if that's business leaders coming together or how you would regulate it. Because I always feel like there's that one person like in their basement working on some mad scientist project that like
Totally.
It's hard to monitor everybody, so to speak. But like, I guess the question is like, is this good for humanity? And your resounding answer is yes, this is awesome for humanity. But it's like everything else, every other advancement, there's a ton of risk, but as long as we continue to work together, we should be able to see incredible advancements in the human species.
Yeah, exactly.
Or human race.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. And I think that's totally true. And I think you make there is a lot of conversation about how do these guidelines and regulation get created? Like, where does that live? And I think some of the recommendations, which make a lot of sense, is like the larger, the Googles of the world, even OpenAI, creator of Chat GPT of the world, which is owned a lot by almost 50% by Microsoft, Facebook or Meta, stuff like that. Like that's where regulation lies. But if it's a small startup, it's probably less regulated. Because even getting into that game from a data perspective is a big it's a big
investment.
Yes, thank you. Because obviously AI, it has to be fed up to a certain point, a lot of data. And getting that data in the specific form that it needs to be in or cleaned in a way that makes it make sense, I think that's a huge undertaking that requires a lot of human activity to make it work. So so I think it's sort of to be determined, but I think there's that's going to be a conversation that really lives on for a lot of years and should, right?
I did like your use of the term cleaned. Like imagine like cleaning a surface or something, but kind of like getting the most pure aspect of data into the AI. I don't know what the term is exactly, protocol or anything.
Right.
So that it's rather than just feeding it a bunch of random inputs.
Correct. And I think one of the reasons that that's really important is because like if we feed AI just all the data we randomly have, it can ingest that. But if you think about it, it's going to have all the bias, all the implications of the data we have, right or wrong, that exists, and it's going to take that and potentially make some really bad output from it. So I do think that's really important from even a bias perspective, but also making sure that whatever's fed is clean so that the outcome gets better over time as it learns and grows.
Definitely.
So
I was really interested just to read about the difference between generative AI and artificial general intelligence. Is there a chance you could just talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's a cool distinction between the two forms.
Yeah. So the way I would break it up, like AI obviously it's a huge topic, very broad. I would say a lot of the AI that people know about from, say, the last decade or something is really more machine learning in that we're feeding the AI is learning from a set of things, much like humans would, to make outputs based on that. So, for instance, like you might, instead of just programming it to say like, what is the temperature and it outputting the temperature, it might say like, give you the temperature and the weather and a few more things. Very much like a Siri or Alexa integration. So generative AI is actually creating the concept of that, which is what's really made AI come into the forefront of people's like minds recently. It's really about creating content, right? Creating unique content that hasn't been created before by the AI. And I think a distinction of this that's really important, it's actually based on an LLM. That's what an acronym, but a learning language model. And that learning language model is all about ingesting tons and tons and tons of data, of any type really to analyze it and then be able to process it, much like our brains would process like a neural network. You may hear that, to make multiple different connections with that data to then create unique content on the output. And so that's sort of one of the unique, I think, differences. And I think its ability, like we know what goes into AI, like we know what it ingests and we know what the original program does, but actually what happens, especially with something like a learning language model, what happens inside of that is actually, which is kind of mind blowing, a little not understood completely. So that the outcome is something totally different that is generated by the AI.
It's not there. You can't trace it necessarily to the input that you provided.
Correct.
It's truly unique or original.
Correct. Exactly correct. And I do think an interesting point on that is, and this is true with Chat GPT, it is a learning language model. And there are other models called knowledge, like that are knowledge-based models. And there's some actually, I guess, hilarious or embarrassing sort of stories about people using Chat GPT and it just being completely incorrect, right?
Yep.
Because it's ingested data that's not accurate.
Yep.
And so it's outputting stuff that's even more inaccurate. And so there was one of the ones that's come out recently is there was a legal case in Texas, and a lawyer basically had gone to court, filed his brief, whatever. Well, like after that was filed, the court was like, we can't find any of the cases you referenced. Like, this makes no sense. And so it turns out he had to admit, I don't understand AI, but I had heard about Chat GPT, and he basically had Chat GPT write his whole legal case, and it was all incorrect. It had made up cases like that are referenced that didn't exist, and complete stories about them. Like pretty much everything about his brief for his defense, the defense of his client, was incorrect. And so I do think people should be aware, like when dealing with that, like you really do need to like verify that the information's correct. It's just because it comes out of Chat GPT or some other AI tool doesn't mean that it's accurate at all. It could be totally fake, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and a little scary, and I think also goes back to that risk conversation of this is a risk.
Okay, so like let's say in the future you got like a robot in your house or whatever. Mm-hmm. What would make them? How would they act? Like if they utilize the same like technology as Chat GPT mm-hmm. versus artificial general intelligence, how would they respond differently? If you could, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, the best way I could describe that maybe is like, if it's just general, if it's like machine learning,
yeah.
for instance, like general AI, it's basically going to be programmed to carry out a set of a task,
yep.
Based on what's there.
Yep.
And it might not change a lot over time, but it is still pretty intelligent. Mm-hmm. I think, if you take an example where it's more generative,
yeah,
and you've taught it that, and this is like getting more advanced, but it's like there's a great, I don't actually remember who said this, but a great example of a robot that you're saying, okay, robot, I'm going to teach you to jump, and it's working off like a learning language model.
Yeah,
I'm going to teach you to jump, and so there's some reward there, but not necessarily instructing it how to jump. And the higher, maybe there's a reward of the higher you jump, there's a greater feedback or whatever,
yep.
whatever that would be, like to reward the AI. And so the example in that case is like the robot might not just jump off the ground. It might actually go find a ladder, get a ladder, climb up the ladder, and
yeah, that's awesome.
To like get off the ground as high as possible. So
yep.
like that's an unpredicted outcome
yeah.
that you didn't see coming. So a little different. That's how I would distinguish them. Like unpredicted outcomes, not necessarily bad,
definitely,
but a different outcome that maybe you would have solved it if it was the other way. I will tell you, as an aside, like my ideal version of my AI robot is Rosie from the Jetsons. If you ever watched the Jetsons, the cartoon, Rosie's like the perfect, epitome of what what my perfect epitome of a robot would be. That would be very intelligent AI. I mean, it's very interesting to think about even how old that is and what they were doing with that, in the story. That would be pretty cool.
What about her? Would you be like, hey, that's the robot I would like to have in my family?
Well, I just think like friendly, right? Helping the family, taking away like day-to-day tasks
Definitely.
that are placed on the robot versus, the family or whoever's in the family having to take time to do those. So just really interesting.
Okay, so just sticking generally in this risk type aspect of AI, you're saying this isn't the end of humanity. But what about the end or a major transformation in the workforce? Are our jobs all at risk? What do you think about generally that aspect of AI?
Do I think in the long term are some things going to change?
Yep.
Definitely. But I think that's been true again with other like technologies that have come out. And
definitely.
I mean, look at the internet. Like it's created a whole new, when that came out, like prior to the internet, it created a whole new, like, our business wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for the internet from a digital marketing standpoint, right?
Yep.
And so I think the opportunities will be huge. And I also think that, I think some jobs will likely be displaced, but the, opportunity for new jobs and new job creation and new career, opportunities will also exist. And I also think like from a creative standpoint, like the stuff out of AI, like if you look at like the generative, like we haven't really talked about this, but image creation, right?
Yep.
Like AI is really good at taking a current image and like editing it in some way to create, change a background, or like Pete, our director of creative services, like had a amazing sort of demo on that recently.
Yep.
And I think Adobe is like making huge inroads there, which is awesome. But as far as like ideation or creation of the idea, like if you look at some of the AI art that it can create, it's not very good. Now, will that improve over time? Sure. But I think there's always the human aspect that's really important.
Yep.
From a just like this being like, human created versus AI created. Yep. So that makes sense.
Is there anything else you want to say in general about this subject?
The only other thing I would say is like, I think like Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he had he did sort of a world tour recently, and he talked to different like industry leaders, different like political leaders, just sort of gain a sense of like, what's going on with AI and what are people's perceptions of AI. And I think what was really interesting about that is, in general, people are excited, people are fearful. And really what they're fearful about, I think it's less about the extinction piece or the end of humanity. I think some of it's about like, hey, will this AI also represent like my culture, my values, my history as a nation or as a community, right? And so he talked a lot about that, and even how OpenAI is trying to take that into consideration. I also think right now in the world of tech, like AI it's a space race, right? From a lot of different companies, and so everybody's jumping in. Another like poignant thing he said is like from a rules, regulations, from a AI being end of humanity scary to something more mundane, he was like, Chat GPT 4, the current OpenAI model, isn't really that's not going to end humanity. But he's like, the question he asked, which I think is really good, is how do we ensure that Chat GPT 9 doesn't become that? And so I think that's a poignant question that people should be asking and sort of questioning and wondering like, hey, what's going to happen here?
I was thinking about cars and just like, if my car had a bad attitude and it's just like, I'm sorry, your life is over, and just drives off the road, like
right.
That to me seems like a fearful aspect of AI, so to speak. But
well, and I think, and it is, and I think from an autonomous driving standpoint, especially as more AI gets integrated into that, which is already happening. I think it's something that definitely has to be taken into account. That it doesn't veer. There have to be safety checks, unintended consequences, right? We don't want that, and so I think that's really important. Yeah.
Jason, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us again.
Absolutely.
We'll try to make sure that it's not 2 years again before you get back here. We'll get you on sooner.
Yeah.
And thanks again for watching and listening to everybody out there. Have a great day.